We all go a little mad.
All right. Hello, and welcome to the Horror Hour. It's the place where we discuss, debate, and disagree on all things horror. I'm one of the co-hosts here, Yutaka. Hello. And I'm joined with Liam.
Hello.
Oh, you didn't mock me this time. That's nice, Liam. And then George.
I feel like I've done it enough.
Right, Liam, this was my moment. Thank you.
Sorry.
Hello.
And then today I'm really excited because we are joined with a special guest, Jonathan Barkan, who is here to talk about their upcoming documentary. So I'm gonna, well, I should say as I'm wearing the shirt, but I will let you kind of give a high level overview of this amazing project.
Yes, hello. Jonathan Barkan. I am the creator and director of Mental Health and Horror, a documentary. I am also the head of acquisitions at Mutiny Pictures. And in my past, I was the managing editor of Bloody Disgusting. I was the editor-in-chief of Dread Central. I did acquisitions for Epic Pictures Group, who own dreadcentral.com. So they run the label Dread Central Presents, which is what it was called when I started there, and then it became Dread. And then I also helped co-found and acquired films for a company called The Horror Collective. So, and you probably know one of The Horror Collective's original productions on Shudder, a film called Slacks. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's such a film.
That.
I feel like by bringing up the film Slacks, everyone here was suddenly like, let's not go down that road.
It wasn't
Never.
It was such it was fun. It was a very unique idea, which I love because, you know, sometimes with horror things can sometimes get stale, and I really enjoyed it.
Agreed.
Well, that's what matters, you know, as long as you have fun.
I did like, have we passed the 30-second mark?
Yes.
Because
I feel like we have to have passed 30 seconds by now, but just in case, rambling speech right now is specifically aimed to ensure that we're past the 30-second mark that we must pass so we can swear once we're past 30 seconds mark.
Yeah.
So, let's be honest, Yutaka doesn't, it wasn't the film that made him go. It was just the word slack.
Oh, that's funny. That's more of a year term. Well, that's nothing here.
Is it not?
No.
I didn't even know what you're talking about.
What?
Slack? Is that a word that we use in the UK?
Yes.
When someone's slacking off?
Oh, no. We'll get to the why we have Jonathan here, but it's
I'm very very interested in what this is. No, Liam.
Liam,
I am invested in what you are putting here.
No,
well, if something's slack, means it's like loose.
Give it some slack. Sorry, yes, I knew what you mean.
I thought you were referring how you say pant instead of pants.
Oh, so no, that again, that's just weirdness. That's not like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
but slack is a word.
This may be a complete and how should I put this, immature connection that my brain is firing on, and it may be completely wrong, so please correct me. So are you hinting that slack can be used as a euphemism for like flaccid?
I wouldn't say flaccid.
You would say it like, I mean, people actually also say it if they've done something wrong as well. Like, so if you were to like, if they did something wrong and you were like, why didn't you do that on time? Then they say, cut me some slack, which means give me a break. That's what it means by slack.
Oh no, we definitely said that in the US as well. Cut me some slack.
No, when I thought
if
you
we
were...
imagine the scene from Cherry with Tom Holland,
he's talking about
camera...
an arsehole being
Yes.
like falling
I was
out.
talking about
Is
an
what he's
arsehole.
talking about.
Oh,
Prolapse. Okay, got it.
Basically.
oh gosh,
Yeah.
I didn't know we
All
were
right,
going
it
to talk
took
about
us
that.
20 minutes to get to
I know.
this.
I know.
Wow.
Look at that. Can we just take a moment to appreciate that we got past the 30-second mark so we could use the word prolapse? Everything is
How
right
It's an
Another
on.
asshole as well.
Well, with that, so yes, we are here to talk about mental health and horror documentary.
Oh.
Wow.
I don't know how we got there, but
people are gonna watch this. Everyone who pledged at the Kickstarter, and they're gonna say, like, I'm so excited to hear about this project that I invested in and that I really want to see come to life. And this is the asshole that's making it.
Never.
So with
Fine.
that, let's first start and ask what kind of brought this about and how long is this journey? Because it's still ongoing, I believe.
Yeah. We're still in production right now. So what brought this about is basically horror has been a very important part of my life since a very, very early age. Because when I was very young, there was a lot of sickness in my family, and like really intense sickness, not like just recurring small things, but it was always going. It was basically my sister had brain cancer, and they thought that it was terminal. So they at that point, with that specific type of brain cancer in the late 80s, very early 90s, basically they were saying, like, yeah, it's like a 5% chance that she's going to make it. And she made it, but it was 2 years of chemotherapy, radiation, surgeries. When we would visit, she would be wrapped up like the mummy. There'd be tubes going in and out of her, like some sort of a Stuart Gordon film. And just the entire experience was really difficult because I was younger. She was about 3 odd years older than myself. And I was born in 84. So I was like 5, 6, 7 years old when all of this was happening. So for me, the way to contextualize it ended up being horror. It ended up being the horror video games that I was playing, the horror shows that my friends and I would sneak watching when we had a sleepover, and we would stay up late. Some friends had a whole collection of EC comics, and so we would just sit there and read through it all. And so horror was a way to put a monstrous face to what was happening. And as I grew older and as I started experiencing a lot of bullying and a lot of my own depression and PTSD and trauma from everything that was happening, and I started to feel like the monster, it was this interesting conversation that I was having with myself, where it used to be that the monster was a villain and needs to be vanquished. It's, the monster is cancer. You have to get rid of cancer and beat the monster. That's what it originally was. But then when I started feeling monstrous based on what everyone was telling me, you're ugly, you're gross, you're this, because also, before I was 16, I had a severe underbite and crossbite. I actually had a pretty extensive jaw surgery to take care of that. But here I am with an underbite and a crossbite. So I'm literally like, a little off and a little different. So that was fodder for a lot of bullying and mockery. And so I felt like the creature. I felt like the monster. And that's when I started developing some empathy to the villains of horror films. Now, I'll say it right away. That doesn't mean I excuse their behavior. But if I look at it from a grand perspective, I totally understand the anger that Jason Voorhees has. For example, he's at a summer camp. He just wants to enjoy a summer camp, and everyone's bullying him. He gets forced off of the pier and he drowns because no one cares about him. That right there is a villain origin story that I sit there and go, I can understand why you're doing it. I don't condone like thrusting a machete into the face of a guy in a wheelchair, or bending a sheriff in half, or slamming people against a tree when they're in their sleeping bag, but I get the anger. And so for years I was always thinking, how can I talk openly about my mental health struggles and how horror has really helped me. And through Bloody, through Dread, I had the platform by which I could speak openly about myself and about what I've gone through, and how horror gave me the means to explore empathy and catharsis and so many other healthy emotions through what many have deemed an unhealthy genre. And then I started getting very protective. Obviously, I started, getting really upset when anyone would have negative things to say about horror, especially if they're the kind of people who don't watch horror, who don't know it, who don't appreciate it. That's when I just get really frustrated. And so the real genesis for the documentary itself came about when I was visiting the set of Sam Weinman's queer horror documentary that he's making for Shudder right now. And while I was behind the cameras just watching how it was all done, it hit me. I was like, this is exactly what I could do right here. This is how the discussion of mental health and horror and how they overlap and can impact one another. This is what it needs to be. So I'm the kind of person that I always carry around a little journal and a pen. And I went to the corner of the soundstage, sat down, and just furiously started scribbling everything down. I was like, okay, here's how I think it should look. But wait, here are the people that we need to add. Here's some resources that I know of. And here's more about how it can look. Because it was so many ideas spilling out that I didn't want to focus on one at the expense of, forgetting the others. So it was just a brain vomit of so much coming out. And I spent several weeks and actually a few months refining everything and putting together a 2-page presentation of the idea. Like, here's a synopsis, here's some facts, here's some people that I would like to interview, here's the format, like all of this. And then one day I reached out to my now executive producer and business partner, Andrew Hawkins, who at the time was with Creator VC, and he was doing the In Search of Darkness and In Search of Tomorrow first-person shooter. He was working on all of those documentaries. And I presented him with this idea, just literally via Twitter DM. And, said, hey, I just want to know your thoughts. What do you've made documentaries. Does this have value? Is there a purpose in pursuing this? And I sent him the doc, and 20 minutes later, he shoots me a DM and he simply says, I need you to get on a Zoom with me right now. We get on, and he says, and the first things out of his mouth were, 1, thank you for sending me this. 2, we're making it. I don't care how, this is going to get made. And I'm sitting here thinking, because I've worked in film acquisitions and talked to a lot of filmmakers, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, cool, we're going to get it made. So now we start the process of like trying to find investors and trying to find people who believe in it and, all of this stuff. And it's going to be like years before it actually gets made. And he's like, no, we're not going that route. I need you to build out a team. This is what we need to do first. And he gives me a list of roles. And originally, I wasn't going to direct it. Originally, there was someone else that is a part of our production that was going to be the director, and she was originally completely on board. But then months later, she said, my journey in filmmaking and in the film industry does not include directing. That's not the path that I want to go down. And I want to focus on the path that I've laid out for myself. And so then we were in a situation where like, okay, we don't have a director. And we were thinking about it and talking about it. And then one day Andrew said, Jonathan, I think it's you. I think you have to do this. And I was terrified. I was like, the only thing I've directed was a short film in high school, and holy hell was that shit. But I thought about it more and more. Like he told me, he was like, I just want you to think about it. Take the weekend, think about it, really consider it, what it means, what it would allow you to do, just everything. Like, just think about it. And the thought that kept coming into my mind when I was thinking about it is that whomever is in the director's chair is also going to be in the hot seat when it comes to publicity and interviews and things, because this is a very sensitive topic. This is something that is very personal and meaningful to a lot of people. And so if I'm not willing to face that kind of a scrutinization and that kind of an intense line of questioning, how can I ask anyone else to take that when the take on that burden, that responsibility, when the idea was mine? That's unfair to them. And so that was kind of that's how I went from being the creator to being the creator and the director. And so that's kind of the mechanics of how mental health and horror, a documentary, began. Yeah, I hope that rambling long answer helped get everything across.
Well, and again, it's still ongoing, because I know you're still currently conducting interviews, and I'm just curious, how many interviews have you conducted? I mean, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, we've conducted approximately 20 interviews. Now we have at least another, I would say, 15 to 20 to go. And one of the biggest delays that we've come to face, because originally we wanted to be done, and you know, we are in a situation where we are going to have to delay the release. It's just inevitable. We launched June of last year with the hope that we would have our world premiere this March, and that's less than a year to shoot everything, script everything, edit it all, put it together, send it out to legal, get the approval, get all of our insurance, get all of our ducks in a row, and start submitting to festivals and the entire process. It was very hopeful, and it was entirely unrealistic, and that is on me. I because I'm new to this, that was my inexperience, and so I completely own that. But yeah, we're taking this extra time to get a bunch of interviews. And as I was saying, you know, one of the delays is that a lot of these interviews are all over the world. And so we have to find videographers in those regions to be able to have the same recording schedule as the people that we want to interview. We've got to set all of that up, and then we have to do the interview, then get all the files sent to us, QC everything, and we have to do that over and over. Like, we're in the stage right now where we are going to focus a lot of our interviews on the mental health professionals themselves. And for that, we've got someone in Chicago, someone in Tokyo, someone in Norway, someone in Scotland, and I want to say someone in Germany. At the very least. Oh, and we have someone in Rhode Island. So, you know, we have all of these people that are scattered everywhere. So the coordination to put all that together is pretty intense. And then additionally, this just gives us the breathing space to make sure that the edit is going to be something really amazing. It also factors in for situations that we couldn't have foreseen. Like in one of our interviews, the guy that we interviewed told us a story, and it's a good 5 to 8 minutes of uninterrupted story time. And by the end of it, he's sitting there very emotional. My videographer and I are behind the camera, like silently, tears streaming down our cheeks, because it was such a powerful and impactful story that was being told. And I'm sitting here now going, how can I put that in the documentary without editing it, but at the same time realizing that if I just put a 5 to 8 minute clip, that's not going to really work in terms of an audience experience. So now we're sitting here brainstorming what are ideas that we can do to take that story and do something really interesting with it, so that visually it's as engaging as the audio, as the narration itself. So we're in this wonderful place where we still have a lot of work to do, but it allows us to be incredibly creative, which is apropos, very good for my mental health, because we get to explore and try new things, and some of it'll work, some of it won't, but we get to try.
Yeah.
I completely forgot the question, so I'm sorry.
No, I think that's I think that's really interesting. I love the fact that not only that you're including just people within the horror industry, but also mental health professionals. I think that
people outside of the horror industry. That was another big one. That's a really big and important thing for me, because it's not as much, but we're as people in the horror industry itself, but we really wanted to try and get some people outside of the horror industry, because we wanted to show that horror fans don't have to be people in the horror industry. You don't have to be a critic. You don't have to be a podcaster. You don't have to be a producer, a writer, a director. You can be a horror fan and work for a real estate company. You can be, one of the people that we want to interview is a sex worker, because sex workers are so stigmatized and stereotyped, just like horror fans are. And so we really wanted to take the opportunity to say, here are these people who are doing incredible things, who are, living life and being successful and finding a path for themselves. And they also love horror. They find comfort in that genre, and they're safe, they're healthy, they are mentally sound. Even if they aren't necessarily, even if they live with a mental illness, they're still aware of how horror can be used for good, and how some people can twist and distort the genre into something evil. So, that's why it was really, really important to say, for horror fans who aren't in the horror industry to be able to watch this and say, hey, they're not in the horror industry, just like I'm not in the horror industry. And therefore, I can take more from this, because I don't feel excluded by not being, in the horror community. You are, if you love horror, regardless of what you do or who you are a part of the horror community. And that's such an important aspect that I think a lot of people find themselves feeling ostracized or unwelcome, when in reality, it's the opposite. If someone comes up to me and says, hey, my day job is crunching numbers for a mortgage company, and at home, I love watching A Nightmare on Elm Street, I'm going to say, you're a part of the horror community. Thank you so much for what you bring to the genre, for what you do by just appreciating it.
I think that would stand for us as well.
Yeah, this is new to us. Like what, 6 months in? Because we all have our normal day jobs, and I would say with COVID, that's what really how we were all able to connect, because obviously, just more either group chats or just videos in terms of just YouTube reviews, critics, all this. And I mean, honestly, horror films for me are kind of like my coping mechanism. Honestly, I think anytime I just want to have something that like calms me down, which is the funniest thing to say, but truly, I'm going to go put on a slasher film. Really, those calm me down. Maybe it's because I'm not one of those helpless victims, but I really do. Horror for me has just always been something that, it gets my blood pumping, it gets me just focused, and it just puts me at ease. And
and sometimes I put on horror movies because I want to cry. That's another thing. Like, I want to grieve the people that don't make it, or I want to empathize with the story in a way that other films don't offer me. A great example, Natalie Erica James's Relic. Unbelievable film. And I watched it for the first time 4 months, I'm sorry, 4 months after the passing of my grandmother, who died from dementia. And so watching Relic, which is this allegory for Alzheimer's and dementia, I was deeply, deeply impacted by how that was presented. And I genuinely was I wouldn't say a blubbering mess, but I was this close to it when that film ended. So yeah, horror can really hit pretty much every single emotion that humans are capable of. And it's because of that it's such a powerful vehicle for impacting our mental health and making us just feel like we're connected to something.
I 100% agree. And I always think, I remember when I was, again, like you, I was young when I started watching horror films. Thankfully, my mum was a huge horror movie fan. And she used to let me watch stuff like Ghost Ship and everything when I was like 7 or 8. Yes. And then she was like, then I'd have nightmares, and she's like, right, I've got to take it away from me. And I was like, no, I want the nightmares. But she used to get so much slack from like my grandparents saying, what a terrible, like, why are you letting him watch these films? But like, I remember like maybe 5-6 years ago, I said to her, like, randomly, I just want to say thanks for like letting me watch those films, because like now that's it. Even if it did, when you're young, and I'm not saying that everyone should go and let their kids watch scary movies, because it might not work for everybody. But yeah, for me, I think watching at a young age, and I suppose, and you have that negativity behind desensitization in films, because people go, oh, they're being desensitized to but that doesn't necessarily always have to be in a negative stance, because I think people think, oh, they're being desensitized, which means, like you say, they think this is okay, and it's not that. You can still be desensitized by some of the things you're seeing on screen, but you can still have it can be in a good way, because you're still enjoying in those films. And so stuff like that. So I've always loved horror films, and like you said, it's always been, that's like my go-to. And I'm a huge zombie apocalypse was like my favorite genre. I was always a big George A. Romero fan, and I started getting into recently, and it sounds crazy, but it actually really works, horror ambience on YouTube. And there is like zombie apocalypse ambience that just plays like it says like, it looks like you're in an apartment, and you can hear like the sirens going and saying like, please get, and it's like it's rate, and I don't know what it is, and I use it to read books and stuff, and like it really helps me focus. And I don't know, but yeah
no, I mean, there was a period in my life where so to date myself, I would have my Discman plugged into the wall so I didn't have to worry about the batteries running out. And I had the Silent Hill 1 soundtrack that I just put on repeat all. And I'd put on my headphones while I was laying in bed, and I would fall asleep and wake up to the sounds of Silent Hill. It became very calming and soothing for me. And to this day, I will still put on the music from Akira Yamaoka for many of the Silent Hill games as a way of relaxing and calming down. And yeah, I think it's very interesting that you bring up, that you love these zombie apocalypse films, because last year there was a very popular in 2020 and in 2021 there was a very popular study that was making its rounds on all of the websites, saying that horror fans were better suited to the isolation of the pandemic. The study done by Colton Scribner, and it's true in so many ways. And when people say,
explain a lot.
George, when you're talking about, you use the word desensitized and how it's not always a bad thing. Horror fans are sitting here watching these apocalyptic movies over and over and over and over. So we become desensitized to the idea of the shock and terror of the situation, and we immediately move into the preparation and adaptation stage. So that's a great example of desensitization working for us. Another example that I can think of is, think of all the horror films that are aimed at children, things like Paranorman or Monster House, Coraline, things like that. And children who watch this, who then think to themselves, I could be scared of the boogeyman, or I can think of all these characters that I've seen who face the boogeyman, who stand up to it. So I'm desensitizing myself to the fear and terror and the, I don't know what to do. There's something here and it's terrifying, and I'm just gone. Like, no. I've seen what these kids who are like me, what they can do, and I can do that too. So yes, is there this idea of desensitization? Sure. If you want to make it always a bad thing, then you're missing out on how desensitization has the ability to help people.
Oh, that's very true.
Yeah. Really, like I always say, like, if everyone has it. So like occasionally if I'm like a bit down and I'm like, oh, can't be asked, I just want to like wrap myself up, I will put something on. I'll aim towards more campy horror films. I always wanted to be a final girl, mainly because I always imagine I am the final girl. And I always gravitate towards more them kinds of horror films, because it makes, when I'm feeling down, as I put myself in their shoes, and it makes me feel like, oh well, I can get over it because they're over it and they're better, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and that's why I love that kind of thing to watch, and it always just makes me happier.
Yeah, and
it's a strange thing,
but I don't think it is. I think when we really sit down and look at it, horror, for all of its imagination and phantasmagorias, it is more often rooted in realism in some way. You think of the characters in like Transformers, and we know that we don't live in a world where trucks can turn into giant robots that become friends with the everyday character and they end up saving the world. That to me is far more outlandish and unbelievable than a dream demon killing kids in a small town, and the entire story is set in this small town. It's kids trying to get adults to believe them, which all of us have experienced at some point in our lives.
Absolutely.
As well as just kind of striking out on your own and planting your own feet. Yeah, is Freddy completely unrealistic? 100%. Freddy is as possible as Optimus Prime. No argument there. But the grand story is, I relate to it so much more because of its immediacy and because it's more low key. I'm looking at my Blu-ray shelf here, and I'm trying to think, like, Nightbreed. Nightbreed is quite unbelievable. Like, there is not a city made up of monsters. But what is realistic about Nightbreed is that there are people who feel like the other and who feel like they need to hide. And some of the people in that community are also like, no, we need to be proudly out there and open about who we are. And the nearby community is a bunch of inbred hillbillies who can't accept change and are terrified by anything that doesn't look like them. And so their answer is to just kill them. And a lot of it is driven by organized religion. So yeah, Nightbreed is a little bit unbelievable, but it's far more believable than it is unbelievable. So,
Yeah.
you know, when you sit here and say, you know, Liam, when you say like, I love watching campy when I'm feeling down and I can't be asked, you know, and I want to watch these campy horror films that have a final girl because I put myself in her shoes and I see myself as her. Those characters are so believable and so strong and so resilient. And yeah, you end up in some situations like with a Sally who is driven mad by the end, but who wouldn't be driven mad by the events of Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
All of them.
Oh.
Or Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street, bringing it back. Like, here's Nancy who is supposed to be like 15 years old or something like that, 15, 16 years old in the events of that film. And she learns how to booby trap her entire house and how to pull out Freddy and how to face him. And here are all these people that don't believe her. And she's like, I don't care. I know what I'm experiencing and what I believe, and I have to do this. So yeah, the characters in horror films are, in my opinion, so strong and so admirable that they deserve to be our heroes.
I think the way you just described Nancy, though, too, in terms, or just that is, well, really when it comes to mental health, because there's still a stigma, regards to either discussing mental health, believing people have mental health struggles. And so it's, I think partially why I've always been attracted to horror, even at a young age as well, is just because that, while it was my coping mechanism, it helped me understand, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel,
Yeah.
It's hard to explain in terms of that. I knew what I was going through. I just don't think it was easy for me to either vocalize that. And the more and more as I would, see how things were going in terms of just managing my own mental health, it's just been very interesting, because I think that's kind of at the core when it comes to horror, because while certain things aren't as believable, I agree. I can relate. And I'm like, yeah, no, I get that.
I think they've all got and talking about, and again, it kind of leading into talking about Friday the 13th, talking about, I think it's Freddy, talking about Nightmare on Elm Street is, and all of these films, because none of my friends that I see on daily basis, no one watches horror films. So these are things that I watch at home alone, because I watch them with mum when I go back to her house, but other than that, I'm on my own. And because I've seen them so many times, the analyzation that people take them as, oh, I don't like seeing blood and being scared. And of course, there are those films where they are just created to be jump scared, and that's absolutely fine. I really enjoy them. But when you look at something like Nightmare on Elm Street, when you realize that what it's really about is these people who are dealing with their trauma from childhood that's finally resurfacing, and they're confronting their own demons in their head. And that is how, in the end, she releases herself from that trauma. Like, people won't spend time to see that. And another one of my favorite films of all time, again, going back to zombie apocalypse, is 28 Days Later. And that film, which is the line that always gets me, and every time I can try and get a friend to watch it, I might listen to this line that the captain says. And when he says that, all I see now is people killing people. And when I look back on the week before that and the week before that, that is what I have seen as far back as I can remember in human history, is people killing people. And you're like, this is what this film is about. Every horror film that's got some sort of stance behind it, and pretty much most of them have those underlying things that if you really watch them and listen to the story, and this is why I'm saying when you become desensitized to the idea of what you see on screen, you can really understand what they're about. But people, again, they won't see that. And it's like when you go, oh, you never see a horror film nominated for the Oscars. There are films that really, if we could break this whole what's supposed to be, these films have so much more in them. And I think it's so important that needs to be said, is that all these films, have something below the surface line that not everybody sees.
No, absolutely. And that's the first time I've heard it said like that, George. And that's such an interesting way to put it, is that horror fans really do tend to pick up on the underlying messages, these underlying themes, because we are desensitized to the blood and gore. That doesn't mean that we are desensitized to blood and gore in real life. I mean, I still remember like 10 years ago when I was driving on the highway and a squirrel ran out and I ran it over and I almost immediately burst into tears because I was like, holy, I just killed an animal. I felt so guilty and awful. And yet, you know, like that was the day and age, you know, 10 years ago or so. It was when we were in a lot of the French New Wave extremity and things like that, when it was really gory and really violent. But I was so desensitized to the gore and violence that you're exactly right. The themes, the subtext, these grander concepts were so much more apparent. And I think if we can help people move beyond the surface level, they'll find that there's something so rich and beautiful. And yeah, you may not like being scared. If you don't like blood, okay, that's fine. There are countless horror movies that don't have a drop of blood. That's totally fine. You don't like gore? Okay, we can, you know, we'll find some PG-13 horror films, even PG horror films. That's fine. Like, we can make that happen. There really is horror for everyone, but it's much like I'm a huge metalhead. I love heavy metal, and you know, death metal, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm a metalhead, and it's the same kind of stigma. You know, people think metal is nothing but growling and screaming, and I'm like, that's not true. You know, in some cases, absolutely. In other cases, not even remotely close. Yeah, but it's always so angry and so dissonant and just it just sounds like noise. And I'm like, cool, you can try listening to this band and these songs and you'll realize that it's gorgeous. Like, it's on the level of almost, you know, classical music with how intricately it's layered and performed. And then with horror movies, people just think it's blood, guts, and boobs. And we're sitting there like, yeah, if you are stuck in the mindset of, I'm just going to say it, like a lot of 80s horror films. I love the 80s. I love the 80s when it comes to horror. But I realize that in terms of, you know, trying to do away with stigmas and stereotypes, the 80s didn't really do much in that regard. And so, you know, if people have a very specific mindset of what horror is, challenge number one is just breaking that mindset. It's opening the doors and saying the horizon is so much bigger and so much more beautiful than you could have possibly imagined. And once we get that, you know, Yutaka, hold up your shirt. You've been missing out. That's all that we need to say.
I will also say, even though horror films will also prepare you in life for so many other things. I can think of several. I will never drive behind a log truck. Just saying, Final Destination 2 saved a lot of lives. We may be
I will
in a
never
pandemic.
get in a lying down sunbed.
That too. But
nope.
We're in a pandemic, and let's just be serious that Contagion called this all out. And Contagion is a horror film. And I mean, truthfully, it's very interesting. And honestly, all I would say, the heroes or heroines and horror films, I mean, we're the fucking MacGyvers. We're gonna last. I'm just saying, y'all.
Yeah, 100%.
I will outlive everyone.
Yeah, yes. Nancy was MacGyver before MacGyver. I think MacGyver was started probably a few years after Nightmare on Elm Street. It had to have. But yeah, Nancy MacGyvered the shit out of her house.
Before Home Alone was even a thing, Nancy was doing it. I'm just saying.
Yep.
I mean, there's just something to be said about those characters. And I don't know. I always find, I don't know, there's just something about, you know, we're all flawed. Nobody's perfect. And so that's why, obviously, when you see all these other films, which I still love film in general, but I just feel like, as George had stated, there's just so much more that you can pull from a horror film, that whether it just be, you know, your mental health or just in real life, that you can pull from, and it can just enrich your life and just better it more, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
It was deep, guys, but it was good. I feel like we all got a lot out today.
See, horror is our, even talking about horror is its own little therapy session.
It is. And we've gone, how far into this have we gone without swearing? Because you don't need to swear, guys. See, we just talked.
Now,
don't forget we started with assholes and prolapsing and a lot.
We got everything out at the beginning so that we could have a proper conversation.
and prior to this, though, George did have a proper cry. So and there was some blood, so you can't rule that out. But I'm really excited. I can't wait to see more, or wait to hear, and I can't wait to actually see this documentary. I just think it's very, it's just, I can't say enough about mental health, because I think even more, especially in a pandemic, as you had stated, yes, as a horror fan, I felt that I was prepared in terms of just, isolation and just all of that. I feel that I was like, okay, I'm good to go in a sense, but I feel that this topic is more relevant now than ever. And I feel that it, just for me personally talking about it, but I can't wait to see how this helps others. And hopefully, again, as the shirt says, I hope more people watch horror films and actually see what they've been missing, because there's just so much.
Well,
there's so many different genres, and
that's one of the goals of the documentary, because when we think of a film, we also have to think, who is the audience? It doesn't make sense to make a movie without considering who the audience is for that film. You have to think about that, because then it helps you decide what are some of the things that you're going to do, what are some of the ways that you're going to craft the film, because your audience is going to have expectations, and you want to subvert a lot of those, but you also want to meet some of them. You don't want to say, I'm making a horror film, and horror fans get all excited, and then you subvert their expectations by creating a musical comedy. There's a difference between subverting and just straight out lying. So
yes.
But when it comes to the audience, when I was asked that, like, who is the audience for this film, and I said, okay, very simple. The core audience is going to be horror fans that live with a mental illness. Cool. The second ring outside of that, it's going to be horror fans and or people living with a mental illness. The ring outside of that is going to be the friends, loved ones, and family of anyone that's within that circle, within those circles, who, and these people, they want to expand their vocabulary. They want to be more open-minded. They sit here going, you say that horror movies help you, but I just don't get it. And these people who are trying to say it, they may not know how to phrase it in such a way that it's going to come across. And that way they can simply say, I don't have the mental energy to do this. I don't have the bandwidth to explain this to you. Watch this. This will help, because now you're hearing from a ton of different voices. So then those people will be like, oh, okay, I get it from this perspective. I hear it from these people. I understand it. And it just gives an opportunity for those friends, family, and loved ones who were in a state of disbelief beforehand to say, now it makes more sense. That's a really big part of that. And then the final ring around all of that is the next generation of mental health professionals, the people who originally would hear a patient say, I'm really depressed, I'm really anxious, I have suicidal ideation, my schizophrenia is flaring up, my ADHD is out of control, whatever it may be, whatever it is that a person is going through. And then that person says, but I watched a horror movie the other night, and it was really great. So many therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists would probably hear that and go, okay, so let's find a way to understand why you're watching something so damaging and destructive and bad for you. Whereas I want the next generation to have one more tool in their toolkit. And that tool is, oh, you like horror? There's actually ways that horror can help. let's explore this. If this is working for you, I want to work with you on utilizing this so that you can feel better and you can work through a lot of what's going on. Because, you know, there are two goals with mental health and horror. The first one is, it's so cliche, and I apologize in advance, but it is, the idea is that I want those people who are in the middle of nowhere, you know, that kid in the middle of nowhere, to know that they're not alone. And and when I thought about that kid in the middle of nowhere, you know, I'm thinking they don't have access to good mental health resources, and there aren't people in their community who also love horror. They feel alone. They feel like the outsider, like the ostracized one. They need to see that they're not alone. And then I also thought about that kid, and I realized that kid could be anyone or anything. It could be, you know, a straight white boy. It could be a queer disabled Black woman. It could be anyone, anything. And in order for these people to really feel like this film is talking to them, they need to be able to see themselves represented in some form or another. Yes. Which is why we're really trying to make this film as diverse as possible, because the love of horror knows no boundaries. It doesn't know skin tone. It doesn't know race. It doesn't know ethnicity. It doesn't know gender. It doesn't know sexual identity. It doesn't know any of that. Anyone and anybody can love horror. So they have to see themselves represented. That's an incredibly important goal that we have. The second goal is that I'm of the mindset that horror needs to stop acting on the defensive. You know, I'm thinking of the Tipper Gores and the Tucker Carlsons who are out there, you know, saying that horror causes violence. You know, Liam, George, you're both in the UK, and I don't know the exact nature of the story, but I know that in the early 90s, there were these two young boys who killed a toddler, and it turns out that they'd watched Child's Play 3. And apparently that's something that is still brought up to this day as, you know, whenever people are like, we have to be scared of horror films because we don't know what they're going to do. It'll create killers. And it's like, that's not the case. But when these people who are in a position of power, who have a platform, who have an audience, when they go out there and say horror films cause violence, say 1 million people believe that, we as horror fans could spend our entire lives talking to those 1 million people, trying to dissuade them and get them to understand. And at our best, we'll be lucky if we get half of them. Mm-hmm. But in that entire time that we've been working to kind of help these people unlearn such a negative and biased viewpoint, that other 50%, that 500,000 people are going out there to their friends and saying horror fans kill people. And it just spreads. It's this plague that just keeps going out. And you know, once they hear it, people assume it's true. They assume it's fact. But the people who are saying these things aren't talking about it from a perspective of science and evidence. They're talking about it from a perspective of personal morality and personal ethics. And what they don't understand is that their personal morals may not align with another person's morals, but the outcome could be the same. I don't like horror movies because I think it kills people. Well, I like horror movies and I don't kill people. We're both non-killers. We are not people who go out and kill people. We just like different things. So rather than go out on the defensive constantly and saying, no, but please, you know, hear us out so that we can say that horror doesn't do these things. This film, in a way, this documentary is a flag of defiance. It's saying, it's going on the offensive. It's saying horror does not hurt people. Horror helps people. And here's the evidence. Here's the science. We have, you know, anecdotal evidence from the people in the horror community and outside of the horror community, the people that aren't, you know, like I said, the podcasters, the bloggers, the critics, the reviewers, you know, whomever. You know, we have that audience. We have the people in the horror community, but we have the mental health professionals who can actually say, here's what horror films do to the brain. Here's how we found that horror fans are ultimately doing better in these circumstances, how they're mentally more prepared in some circumstances, how sometimes they're more mentally healthy. And if anyone wants to attack what we are saying, my immediate response can then be, listen, I want to hear your perspective. I really do. But I want you to be able to back it up. So unless you have the science and the evidence to combat what we're saying, you are now the anecdotal evidence. You are now the anecdotal phrasing that does not stand up against what we have put forth. So you have to do the work. You have to show us that horror can actually hurt people. Show us the science. Show us the peer-reviewed journals. Show us everything that says this is what horror does. Because then we can engage in a discussion. Then we can figure out, okay, how did you go about this? How did you figure this out? What are your metrics? Does this pass the standards of a scientific investigation? And if it does, okay, then let's explore it. I'm not going to sit here and say you've done something that passes all the check marks, and I'm just going to put on my blinders and you know, cover my ears and go, nah, 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 nah. No, if you are able to provide it, then we need to explore it. We need to figure out what's going on. But you've got to do the work. And unless you do the work, I'm sorry, your words just don't carry the same weight as the people who have done the work.
Like,
No, that's
just the perfect explanation for it, though, because as you said, obviously, yes, there was obviously the incident in the UK in the James Bulger, and it is something to this day that is still brought up in the UK. And let's be real, there is always going to be them people who want to stay on that high horse.
Yep.
But if you can reach the people who read what they say, if you can reach them people, they're the people that you need to change, that you can change, and they're the people that this kind of thing is going to be perfect for, because then it'll give them an understanding. And yes, you might not be able to kick to the curb the naysayers who are like, obviously have built a platform on spewing this kind of crap. But if you can get the other people, that's just such a perfect thing to do, because it getting the people that listen to these people takes away that person's power, because they no longer have a platform. So if you can change their minds through something like this, this just sounds like something that should be supported by everyone. And no matter, like, even if you don't think you have mental health problems, it's not like even if you're just a horror fan and you don't discuss your mental health problems, or you don't think you have mental health problems, it's still something that you should, from what you've been saying, it's still something that they should be pushing as well. And it sounds like it's going to be a fantastic watch.
I hope, you know, I hope at the end of the day. But I think I'm going to bring up something, and I promise it's going to go somewhere. I promise you. You know, there was a period. There was at one point a statistic that something like, what was it, like 2 or 3% of the United States identifies as some form of queer. But that study was done in the 80s, when there was a lot of queer phobia, and when there was a lot of people who were queer being attacked physically and brutalized. And so you can only assume that a lot of people who were queer, who are queer, let me rephrase that, actually both who were and are queer, when that study was being done, probably didn't identify as queer out of fear for their own life, out of shame, out of guilt, out of whatever. And so the statistic was, it wasn't accurate. The reason I bring this up is because the CDC has stated that through their research, 1 in 5 Americans lives with a mental illness. But we are still in a day and age when mental illness is something that is negatively looked on and is stigmatized and is lambasted. And has that discussion changed over the past few years? Yes. But the needle still needs to shift so much more. And
Absolutely.
so I bring that up because the CDC says 1 in 5. I genuinely believe that it's closer to probably 1 in 3, if not more. And there are so many people out there who don't even realize that they're living with a mental illness. And it's not out of shame or embarrassment. It's out of a system that we live in that doesn't think of mental health as being as important as physical health. If you are physically healthy, you can perform. If you are mentally unwell, but your body is fine, then clearly it's your own fault. Just get out of bed. Just stop feeling sad. Just, take your meds and that's it. But it's not, and it never has been that easy. And when people who live with mental illness are fed these really damaging messages, it creates that system that I'm talking about where people feel shame and discomfort. Like, how many kids do you think are out there who love horror movies and they live in a religious house, whatever religion? I don't care. I'm not pointing fingers in any way, but they live in a religious house where they have to hide that they love horror films. What a stupid thing to have to hide.
I actually did know someone like that.
Yeah, what a harmful experience for that child, that they can't trust their parents or their siblings or whomever to say, I really like horror movies. And you see me on a daily basis. These parents who are out there, my child couldn't hurt a fly. My child is so sweet and innocent and delightful. But the moment that those kids say, I watched Halloween and I really liked it, those parents are suddenly like, well, we need to take you to church, or we need to take you to synagogue, or we need to take you to a mosque, or we need to take you to temple, or whatever. We need to take you to a therapist. We need to take you somewhere because clearly something is wrong with you. And all that child is going to learn is, I can't share what I enjoy because I'm going to be made out to be a villain by the very people who I trusted and who I loved. And that extends to, I can't tell them that I'm depressed or that I'm anxious or that something is going on and I don't know what it is. But I can't go to the very people who are supposed to help me because I know that they will hurt me. So yes, when I was putting together the presentation for mental health and horror, I said the CDC states that 1 in 5 Americans live with a mental illness. That's all I could say, because I can't say that I believe that it's so much worse, because I don't have the science backing it up. Because the people who are living with mental illnesses that are in a community that would shame them will not admit to it out of fear of what their peers and their community will say about them. And that is one of the most heartbreaking and devastating things that is constantly rolling around in my head. And that's why I really, really hope that this documentary is the start of more such documentaries. Like, we all know that there was that period of Hollywood where, oh, you got Armageddon, you're gonna have Deep Impact. You have Volcano, you're gonna have Dante's Peak. There was always the studios that were competing and doing the competition stories. And it was fun because you had options. I really want to watch a volcano destroy a community. Do I want it to be LA or some mountain town? Doesn't matter. I'll figure that out. Whatever.
Mountain town.
But I'm
always mountain town.
Always mountain town. Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton, absolutely. But I am sitting here saying we're making mental health and horror. And I'm so excited for those filmmakers out there who are thinking, how can I do it with my own experiences, with my own thoughts, with my own point of view, my own perspective. And I'm so excited for that day. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If anyone is out there listening and you are a filmmaker who wants to do something like this, who wants to do your own version of mental health and horror from your perspective, because you feel that you have something to add and something to say, hit me up. I will happily throw my name on as an executive producer. I will champion you to the ends of the earth, so long as I agree with the perspective, so long as I think that you're doing it from with the right intentions. But yeah, I want those stories to be told, because at the end of the day, I am a straight white man. I'm Jewish, so I am part of a religious minority that has experienced enormous amounts of anti-Semitism and hatred over millennia, to the point that our generational trauma apparently can be found in our DNA. Like, it's actually evident within us physically. So, but I pass as a white man, 100%. So my perspective is going to be completely different from, say, an Indigenous woman who wants to talk about how mental health and horror has impacted the Indigenous communities. I would love to see that story. That would be incredible. And the same for people in the Latin communities, in the Hispanic communities, in people in Southeast Asia, or in Russia, wherever, in these environments that are not our own, where there are so many subtle but really meaningful differences. I want those stories. And so I'm hoping, like I say, I hope that this is the beginning of other people telling their own stories, because we need that. We need more of that. The only way we're going to really combat these negative stereotypes and stigmas and these harmful messagings is if it's not just one voice creating a documentary and getting that out there. It's if we have voice after voice after voice after voice rising up and saying, this is true, to the point that we can't say it's just a few of you. We have to say there's enough people raising their voice that I have to listen. I have to take heed.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for people who are listening, then where can they find out more about the documentary, or what can they do to help at this point?
Yeah, www.mentalhealthhorrordoc.com. We have an email list. Please sign up for that. We would love that. You can also follow our Twitter at mhhorrordoc. Or you can follow me at Jonathan Barkan. Our Twitter, the Mental Health and Horror documentary Twitter bio is in the profile is in my bio, so you can find it through there. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, YouTube. Just follow along, and we are we have an Indiegogo coming up. I'm not sure when this is going to be released. If it's in the midst of the Indiegogo, then we have an Indiegogo going on right now. But yeah, anyone who pledges is then any updates that we make are sent to all of our pledges and all of our backers. And we have a Discord that when people pledge, they get an invite to that. And it's this really healthy, beautiful, wonderful community where people are talking about anything and everything. Some people talk about the mental health struggles that they go through. And then in another channel, it's just, hey, I just saw this movie. Anyone else see it? And then it becomes a whole discussion about it. And then, music recommendations, video game recommendations. Like, people are just themselves. They're able to be who they are in this community where they know that everyone loves horror and is open to discussing mental health. So yeah, those are all the different ways that people can be a part of what we're doing. And then as we, the release of the film, we're definitely going to be doing the film festival circuit. It's really important that we hit up the genre festivals, but also the non-genre festivals, because the horror fans who watch us are going to go, yes, there we go. Been saying it for years. And that's great. And we definitely want that. At the same time, we want the people who don't watch horror movies to go, what is this? I'm intrigued. You know what? I'll give this I'll watch this and see what it's like. And hopefully they come out going, wow, I have to really look at myself and question my preconceived notions and my misconceptions. And I don't need anyone to become a horror fan. I really don't. I just ask that you don't demonize the genre when you don't know it. That's all there is to it. So hopefully when we play the non-genre festivals, we'll get a lot of people who will stop vilifying us, even if they don't want to watch horror. That's fine. And then once the film festival circuit is done, then we go the distribution strategy. And we don't have a distributor yet, but we have a lot of distributors have made it very clear that they're sitting here waiting, just getting ready for the time when it's like, yes, now we can engage in discussions. So this is coming out. I promise you that.
I'm really excited, and we'll put all the links below. And I mean, if we're going to demonize or vilify anything, it really needs to be Disney princesses, because it's a really unrealistic expectation. I'm just kidding. I said that for Liam.
I can be a final girl and a princess.
but we will put all those links below, because I think it's really important, and I can't wait to see. And yes, I can't tell you when this will go up, if it'll go up before. Well, it'll go probably. We are very haphazard, so probably once you announce that, this will probably go up pretty soon.
So we can add the link then for the
yes
Indiegogo on the bottom.
As you can tell, we recorded this at an undisclosed date. On an undisclosed date, yes.
That doesn't have the date on, does it? Okay.
Now I'm a little late to cut that out, George. I mean,
I know. So it was
attention to that. Well, and I think this has been.
Please just put like a little box for the entire video, just a little box that says, this will make sense later. And then the moment you turn the clock, it just disappears, and everyone's like, that was not worth the hype.
I don't know if that's worth the edit, though. You guys don't know, I hate editing because it is work. So I will we'll see. Yeah, I'll probably blur it out. That could be a fun little
Easter egg
away. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this has been fun, and I know we kind of actually went over, but I think this was a really important topic, and I really I'm glad we got to kind of talk about this, and I hope it does help, and I hope more people get turned on to it. And I really hope this, just in general, like you said, personally, I would love to see more horror fans, but if anything, if it can help with, as you stated, with mental health and to not demonize it, then I think that, will be so beneficial, though, for everyone.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Thank you all so very much for giving me this platform, for giving me this opportunity, and for these wonderful questions. It's such a pleasure to talk about it, and to know that more people will, even if every single one of your viewers and listeners doesn't care about the documentary itself, I hope that they will feel empowered to be okay talking about their mental health, and to be okay knowing that you don't always have to be at 100%. And if horror helps you recharge, that's great. If it doesn't, okay, but just take care of yourselves. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know who coined it or what, but if it's a book or whatnot, and I feel terrible, but it's okay to not be okay. And to, just know there are resources. And I will make sure to put all that down below as well, because I think that's very important. So
Wasn't it
with
his
that,
song?
I think it might be. That's why I said I can't remember. Right. It's funny. Jonathan said he didn't want to date himself, but when he said when he was born, it made me realize I am the oldest one here. So there's that. So I'm just, oh, that makes me feel wonderful. So at that point,
don't worry, you're young in spirit and in heart.
I don't know about that.
No,
I'm like in bed at 9 p.m. Oh, are you kidding? But it's been a wonderful conversation. And with that, just want to say thanks everyone and goodbye.
Thank you all. Take care.
You have been listening to the Horror Hour. See you next time.